The gift card was a Visa. $3. She slid it across the folding table with 2 fingers, the way you'd push a tip towards someone whose name you hadn't learned. I looked at it. I looked at my sister, Bet, across the table. Bet had been watching her water glass for the last 4 minutes. The lake house paperwork was already signed. I didn't know that yet. I knew the gift card had a cartoon pinecone on it and a foil sticker that said "For you." And I knew the table had gone quiet in the specific way that means everyone heard. I folded the card once, crease along the middle, and put it in the inside pocket of my coat. Welcome back to Shoreline Quiet, where the water doesn't forget, even when the family pretends to. That was a Thursday in October on the Oregon coast, and by the following Monday I had driven back to Astoria, returned 2 client calls, eaten cereal for dinner, and not said a single word to my mother about what she'd handed me. That silence felt like a choice at the time. It wasn't until 6 weeks later, when her calls started, that I understood what it had actually cost me. My name is Nora Laine. I am 41 years old. I work as a residential property appraiser, which means I spend most of my days walking through other people's houses and writing down what they are actually worth, as opposed to what people wish they were worth. The irony of this was not lost on me later. I live in a second-floor apartment on Franklin Avenue in Astoria, 3 blocks from the waterfront. The apartment has 1 bedroom, a kitchen with a window that faces west, and a radiator that clicks for the first 20 minutes every morning. I have lived there for 4 years, since the divorce from Cal, which was civil and sad and entirely expected by everyone except me. Before Astoria, I was in Portland, and before Portland, I was partly everywhere. The lake house in Tillamook County, my parents' house in Seaside before my father died, a 6-month sublet in Eugene that I've mostly stopped mentioning. The lake house anchored all of it. It had been in the family since my grandfather built it in 1962, and it sat on 2.4 acres of Douglas fir above the Nehalem River Road. 3 bedrooms, a covered porch, a detached woodshop that my father spent every summer in. When I was a child, I thought of it as the place the family actually lived. The seaside house was just where we slept during the school year. The reunion had been my mother's idea. She called it that, a reunion, though it was only 12 people, all immediate family, and 2 cousins I'd seen twice since childhood. She'd booked the Tillamook County Lodge herself, a 2-story cedar building with a commercial kitchen and a great room and 6 sleeping rooms upstairs that smelled like pine resin and old carpet. She'd sent a printed itinerary by mail. I remember holding it over the recycling bin for a long moment before deciding to keep it. I drove down on Wednesday afternoon. The coast road was clear, and the light was flat and gray in the way October light on the Oregon coast almost always is. I had a thermos of coffee and a bag in the back seat, and I told myself this was going to be fine. My sister, Bet, was already there when I arrived. She met me at the car, which she almost never does, and she hugged me longer than usual, which I registered and filed and did not ask about. "Mom's in a good mood," she said. "Good," I said. "She reorganized the kitchen this morning," Bet said. "Twice." I carry my bag inside. The great room had 4 round tables set up, each with a small centerpiece, a mason jar with dried wildflowers, a card with a table number. My mother had place-name cards at each seat. I found mine at table 2, next to my cousin Wade, and across from an empty chair that turned out to be for my brother Garrett, who arrived late Thursday morning with a duffel bag and an expression I couldn't read. My mother came out of the kitchen at 5 o'clock, wearing a burgundy cardigan and carrying a bowl of cut fruit. She set it on the buffet table and smiled at the room. "Everyone made it," she said. She sounded genuinely pleased. That was the thing about my mother. The warmth was always real. That was the part that made the rest of it harder to name. She hugged me by the door. She held both my hands. She said, "You look tired, sweetheart," in a voice that was entirely kind, and something in my sternum pulled tight. Dinner that first night was soup and bread. We ate and talked, and my Uncle Russ told a story about a fishing trip that everyone had heard before. My mother laughed in the right places. Bet refilled water glasses. Garrett ate quickly and excused himself. I went to bed at 10. Thursday morning the gift card happened. We were at breakfast, eggs, coffee, a fruit plate my mother had arranged by color. She came around the table distributing small paper envelopes, the kind with the little brass clasp. She put one at each place. I assumed they were program cards for the day's activities, which she had also planned. Mine had my name on it in her handwriting, block letters careful, and even. Inside was the gift card. "It's practical," she said, standing beside my chair, addressing the table in a voice that carried. "Everyone gets something they can actually use." I looked at the front. Visa. $3. The cartoon pinecone. I looked at the back. Activated, the sticker said. Garrett, across the table, was looking at his own envelope. He'd opened it differently, tearing the flap instead of unclasping it. I couldn't see what was inside his from where I sat. Wade said, "Oh, nice," and set his on the table. I said nothing. I folded the card along its center crease, put it in the inside pocket of my coat, hanging on the chair back, and picked up my fork. "Thank you," I said. My mother smiled and moved to the next chair. The property transfer notice was in a manila folder on the kitchen counter by 11 o'clock that same morning. I had gone into the kitchen to refill my coffee. The folder was sitting beside the paper towel holder, half under a dish towel, the way things sit when they've been set down in a hurry and not yet put away. The top edge was visible. The header read Tillamook County Assessor's Office in the small serif font I recognized from my own work. Below it, in the document's subject line, Transfer of Ownership, Recorded Instrument. I put my hand on the folder. I did not open it. Not then. I pour my coffee. I put the folder back exactly as I'd found it, with the dish towel covering the same portion of it. I went back to the great room. I let it sit. My father bought the lake house in 1987 for $43,500, which was not a small sum then, and he paid for it in part with money he'd saved over 11 years working quality control at a seaside cannery, and in part with a loan from his own father that he repaid in full over 6 years. I know this because he told me once, sitting on the covered porch in the summer I was 12, that he had never once been late on a payment, and that he wanted me to understand what that meant. Not because it made him special, because it meant the house was actually his. I understood that differently at 12 than I do now. The house needed work when he bought it. The roof had 2 soft spots. The woodshop had a foundation crack running 18 inches along the north wall. The well pump was original equipment from the early 60s and failed completely the second summer. My father fixed the roof himself over 2 weekends with my Uncle Russ, borrowed a foundation jack and poured a new footing on the woodshop wall, and replaced the pump with a unit he sourced from a salvage yard in Tillamook. He kept receipts for all of it in a green accordion file in the desk drawer in the woodshop. After he died, March 2009, fast, a stroke, my mother kept the accordion file, but she didn't open it. I know because I looked for it 3 months after the funeral and found it in the same drawer, rubber band intact, undisturbed. I started coming back to the lake house the summer of 2010. My mother wasn't using it. She'd moved full-time to the seaside house by then, which she preferred, and the lake house was sitting empty April through October. I had a key. I came on weekends, sometimes for a week in August. I cleared the gutters. I repainted the porch boards with the same gray-green my father had used, which I matched by bringing a chip to the hardware store in Tillamook. I recaulked the window frames on the south side. I had the well pump serviced because the pressure had been dropping since 2008 and my father never got around to it. I paid for all of this out of pocket. The pump service was $387, which I paid by check in June 2011. I remember the amount because it was more than I had budgeted, and I moved it around between accounts for 2 weeks. The window recaulking I did myself with a $24 caulk gun and 4 tubes of exterior silicone. The gutter work was $0 a Saturday, rubber gloves, a bucket. The porch boards were $218.50 in paint and primer. I did not think of any of this as an investment. I thought of it as maintenance on a house I loved and intended to be part of for the rest of my life. That assumption had never been written down anywhere. Between 2010 and 2019, I came to the lake house 41 times by my own count. I kept a small notebook in my glove compartment and wrote the dates. Weekends in March when the river road was still muddy and you could hear the water from the porch. A whole week in July 2014 when Cal and I were separating the first time and I needed somewhere to think. Thanksgiving 2016 with Bet and her kids. The weekend in 2018 when I noticed the woodshop roof was lifting along the ridge and hired a contractor out of Tillamook, a man named Dale Vester, to resheet and reshingle it. That job was $2,140, which I paid in 2 installments because Dale asked nicely and I liked him. I have never asked my mother to reimburse any of it. I have never discussed ownership with her directly. Not once. Not explicitly. This is the part one have had to sit with. My father told me things, on the porch, in the woodshop, in the car on the way back from hardware runs. He told me the house would stay in the family. He told me I had good hands for maintenance and that the house needed someone who would take care of it. He said once, in the summer of 2007, 2 years before he died, "You're the one who comes back, Nora." He used the nickname only he used. That means something. I believed it meant something. I did not ask him to write it down. I have thought about that many times since Thursday morning when I stood with my hand on the manila folder and poured myself a cup of coffee and went back to the great room. The flashback I come back to most, the one I turned over the most times during those 6 weeks after the reunion, was the woodshop. It was the summer I was 26. I'd driven up for a long weekend in August. My father was in the woodshop when I arrived. I could hear the plane from the driveway. He was working on a small cabinet, a birthday present for my aunt. He had sawdust on his forearms and his reading glasses pushed up on his head, and he looked up when I came in and said, "Good, you're here. Hold this." I held the cabinet panel while he checked the fit. We didn't talk for a few minutes. The woodshop smelled like Douglas fir and linseed oil and the particular dry warmth of an old building in August. The plane sound stopped. He set it down. "Your grandfather built the shop in 1963, he said. He ran his hand along the north wall, the one with the old crack, now filled and painted. He built it to last. People don't do that anymore." I said, "You build things to last." He thought about that. "I try to," he said. Then he went back to the cabinet. And I held the other panel while he fitted it, and we worked in the woodshop for another 2 hours, and then we went in for dinner, and I didn't know that was one of the last good summers we'd have before things started to go wrong with his heart. I have held that afternoon in my hands many times since March 2009. The weight of it changes depending on what else I'm carrying. Bet found me on the porch Thursday afternoon, after lunch, while our mother was leading a guided walk down to the river bend with Wade and 2 of the cousins. She sat in the other chair. She didn't say anything for a moment. There was a woodpecker somewhere in the firs to the south, and the river road below us was empty, and the air smelled like damp bark and coming rain. "How are you doing?" she said. "Fine," I said. She looked at her hands. She had a cup of tea. She wasn't drinking. "I signed something this morning," she said. "Mom asked me to. Before breakfast." She said it was a formality. Updating the insurance beneficiary on the property. I looked at the tree line. "I should have asked more questions," Bet said. "You didn't know?" I said. I didn't look at it carefully enough. The woodpecker worked at something persistent and distant. A car came down the river road below and passed, without slowing. I let it sit. I thought about the folder on the kitchen counter. The Tillamook County assessor's header. Transfer of ownership. What did Mom say when you asked her about it? I said. "I didn't ask her," Bet said. She handed me the pen before I'd finished reading the page. I put my hands flat on the porch railing. The wood was damp and slightly soft under my palms, the way old painted wood gets when it's been rained on for 40 years. "Okay," I said. Dinner Thursday night was the confrontation. It didn't start as one. It started as my mother asking if anyone wanted more of the rosemary potatoes and Garrett saying yes, and the overhead light in the great room being slightly too bright for the mood, and everyone at table 2 talking about the drive down and the rain that was forecast for Friday. My mother raised the subject herself. That was the thing. I had not planned to say anything that night. I had the folder still unread and the gift card in my coat, and a head full of Tillamook County header fonts and my father's voice, saying "You're the one who comes back." Nori and I had decided, quietly, that I was going to get through dinner and make coffee and go to bed and call a property attorney in Astoria on Monday morning. Then my mother set down her fork and looked at me across the table and said, "I wanted to ask how you're feeling about the house." The table went quiet. Wade picked up his water glass. Bet put her napkin in her lap and didn't move. Which house? I said. The lake house, my mother said. I've been thinking about it a lot. It's a lot to maintain. A lot of carrying cost for a property that only gets used a few weekends a year. I use it more than a few weekends, I said. You come up, she said warmly. You do, Nora. But it's a lot of property for one person. I put my fork down. I've been maintaining that property for 15 years, I said. I kept my voice even. Gutters, roof, well pump, porch boards. The woodshop alone. Nora. She said it gently. Patient. We all love the house. That's why this is hard. Something in my jaw tightened. I felt my hands flat on the table, the same way they'd been flat on the porch railing 2 hours before, reading the grain. What did you record with the county? I said. She looked at me. Her expression didn't change. That was the part that would stay with me for a long time after, the total absence of surprise in her face. I updated the title, she said. I should have talked to you first. I was going to. When? I said. After the weekend, she said. When everyone was settled. You recorded a transfer instrument before breakfast today, I said. Bet signed it before 8 in the morning. Betty's chair made a small sound against the floor. My mother picked up her fork. It's a legal formality, she said. It clarifies who's responsible going forward. That's all it is. Then show me the document, I said. She looked at me the way she'd looked at me when I was 11 and asking why I couldn't go to Emma Crane's birthday party, patient, a little sad, entirely immovable. I think, she said, that we should have this conversation when we're not all sitting at dinner. You brought it up at dinner, I said. Nora. Garrett said my name, not in agreement with her, just to slow things down. I picked up my fork. I took a bite of the potatoes. The table loosened slightly. Wade said something about the rain forecast. My mother passed the bread to the cousin on her left. I ate what was on my plate. I folded my napkin. I said goodnight to Garrett, who touched my shoulder on my way past. I walked up the stairs and went into my room and sat on the edge of the bed in the dark for a while. Then I went back downstairs at 11 when the lodge was quiet, and I went into the kitchen and I opened the manila folder on the counter. The document was 4 pages. The first page had the Tillamook County Assessor's seal in the upper corner and a recorded instrument number and a date. That morning, 8:47 a.m. The property description was the lake house parcel, 2.4 acres. The legal description I knew from my own appraisal work. Lot 4, Block 2, Nehalem River Estates, 2nd edition. The grantee line read my brother Garrett's name. Solely. I stood at the counter for a long time. The refrigerator cycled. The overhead light above the sink made a small, persistent hum. I put the folder back. Exact position. Dish towel over the top edge. I went back upstairs. I did not slam my door that I drove back to Astoria on Friday morning. I told Garrett I had a client call I couldn't move. He looked at me over his coffee cup and nodded once and didn't ask me to stay. That walked me to my car. She held my arm for a moment at the door and said she was sorry, and I said she didn't need to be, and I meant it. She hadn't known what she was signing. I was certain of that. My mother came out onto the lodge porch as I was loading my bag. She had the burgundy cardigan on again, and her hands clasped in front of her as she watched me put the bag in the back seat. You're leaving early, she said. Client call? I said. On a Friday? Yes. She came down the 2 steps onto the gravel. Nora. I want you to know this wasn't meant to hurt you. I closed the back door. I looked at her. I know, I said. I got in the car. The coast road back to Astoria was 2 hours of flat gray light and Douglas fir, and the river running parallel on the right side for the first 40 minutes. I drove without music. I went over the folder in my head, the recorded instrument number, the date, the 8:47 a.m. timestamp, Garrett's name on the grantee line. I went over the numbers I knew. The $43,500 my father paid. The $387 pump service. The $2,140 woodshop roof. The $218.50 paint. I added them in my head without trying to reach a total because the total wasn't the point. The point was the accordion file in the woodshop desk drawer with the rubber band still on it. I thought about my father saying, "You're the one who comes back, Nori." I thought about Bet saying she handed me the pen before I'd finished reading the page. I thought about my mother's face at dinner, the total absence of surprise when I said the words transfer instrument. She had been ready for that question for some time. I let it sit. I got home at noon. I made coffee. I stood at the kitchen window that faces west and watched the waterfront for a while, the low November light on the water, the container ship sitting at anchor off the bar. I thought about what I actually had, what I could actually show. The accordion file. 41 entries in a notebook. Receipts I'd kept as a matter of professional habit, not intention. A name on a check made out to Dale Vester, Tillamook, 2 installments, 2018. I called a property attorney in Astoria on Monday morning. Her name was Jean Aldrich, and she had an office on Commercial Street above a tax preparation firm, and she listened to everything I told her without writing anything down, and then she asked me 3 questions. Did I have documentation of the payments I'd made? Did I have anything in writing, any letter, any email, any recorded statement, in which my mother or father acknowledged my interest in the property? And had I ever paid any portion of the property taxes? I had documentation of the payments. I had nothing in writing from either parent. I had not paid property taxes. I had not known whose name they were in. Jean Aldrich said, "The file in the woodshop. Can you get it?" "Yes," I said. "Get it," she said. "Everything in it. Don't move it. Photograph every page in place, then bring the originals." I drove back to the lake house on a Wednesday mid-morning, while my mother was at her book club in Seaside and Garrett was in Portland for work. I had a key. I used it. I went directly to the woodshop, to the desk drawer, and I opened it. The accordion file was still there. Rubber band intact, undisturbed, the same as it had been when I looked for it 3 months after my father's funeral in 2009. I photographed every page with my phone before I touched anything. 16 years of receipts and maintenance records and a handwritten ledger in my father's printing, tight and precise, every repair dated and itemized. The foundation work, the roof, the pump, his own labor, which he had tracked in hours even though he was never going to bill anyone. He had just wanted a record. He had wanted to know what the house had cost him to keep. I carried the accordion file to my car. I put it on the passenger seat. I drove back to Astoria. The calls started the following week. Not frantic, not loud. That was never my mother's register. She called on a Tuesday morning at 7:40 and left a voicemail that said she wanted to talk, that she hoped I was doing well, that she thought we'd left things in a difficult place at the reunion and she'd like to clear the air. Her voice was warm, patient, entirely kind. She called again on Wednesday at 8:15. Same register. She hoped I'd gotten home safely. She'd been thinking about me. Thursday, Friday, the following Monday. I listened to each one the same morning it arrived. I did not call back. I was not ready to call back, and I had learned from Jean Aldrich that it was better, for now, to let the record build itself. By the end of the 3rd week, I had 11 voicemails. By the end of the 4th week, 14. By week 6 the calls were coming twice a day, morning and early evening, 7:40 and 5:15, with the precision of someone who has decided that consistency is the same as reasonableness. Jean Aldrich had filed a lease pendens on the property in week 3. My mother received notice of it on a Thursday. She called 4 times that day. I sat with the accordion file open on my kitchen table for a long time one evening in late November. The receipts were organized chronologically, the way my father had left them from 1987 forward. The earliest ones were handwritten, carbon copies from hardware stores in Tillamook and Seaside that didn't exist anymore. The later ones were printed, cleaner, but he'd added notes in the margins, pencil, sometimes pen, about what each job had been for, what he'd found when he opened the wall or lifted the shingle. Soft spot northwest corner. Water came in at the ridge seam, 1994. New pump. Old one seized July 6, 1989, Sunday morning. Foundation crack and wall shop. Hairline, poured 1991, holding as of 2007. He had been paying attention for 30 years. He had written it all down. He had kept the record because the record was the truth of what the house had cost to maintain, and he believed, I think, That truth kept in writing stays true regardless of what anyone says later. I understood that differently at 41 than I would have at any earlier age. I photographed the marginal notes separately. I sent the photographs to Jean Aldrich with a note. She replied in 20 minutes. These are good. My mother called on a Sunday in December, and I answered. I had decided, the night before, that I was ready. Jean Aldrich had reviewed the accordion file, documented the maintenance history, and submitted a formal equitable claim based on 15 years of material contributions to the property. The lease pendens was in place. There was nothing left that a phone call could undo. I picked up on the third ring. Nora, she said. I'm so glad.
Hi, Mom, I said. I've been worried about you.
You've been so quiet.
I know, I said.
A brief pause. I was hoping we could talk about the house. About finding a way to move forward that works for everyone. I'd like that, I said. Can you come to Astoria? She arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. I met her at the door. I made tea, her kind, the orange spice she's had every afternoon since I was a child. I set it on the table in the 2 mugs she'd given me years ago, a gift from some trip she and my father had taken, blue glaze with small white fish on them. She sat across from me. She wrapped both hands around the mug. She looked at the table and then at me, and she said, I want you to know that this was not about pushing you out. Okay, I said. Garrett has been struggling, she said. Financially. The property in his name gives him options. It gives the family options. What does it give me? I said. She looked at me with that particular expression. Patient, sad, immovable. You've always been the capable one, she said. You don't need the house the way he does. I reached into the folder I had placed on the counter that morning. I took out the accordion file. I laid it flat on the table between us. My father kept this in the woodshop desk from 1987 until he died, I said. Every repair, every maintenance job, every receipt. I've continued adding to it since 2010. She looked at the file. She looked at me. I know you've done work on the house, she said.
15 years of it, I said.
Jean Aldrich has the full inventory. The lease pendens is already filed. Something shifted in her face. The patience went somewhere slightly different, tighter, more deliberate. You filed a legal claim, she said. Yes. Against your own family, against a transfer I wasn't informed about, I said. It's practical, she said. Her voice was level, but her hands tightened on the mug. Garrett needed security. I made a decision for this family. That's what mothers do. I let that sit in the room for a moment. You said it was a formality, I said, when Bet signed it. Before 8 in the morning, before anyone was at breakfast. You said it was an insurance update. She set the mug down. That's not what she started. You handed her the pen before she finished reading the page, I said. Those are her words, not mine. Silence. The refrigerator in my kitchen made the same cycling sound it makes every 20 minutes. The radiator had gone quiet. The light in the room was the flat December light off the waterfront. No warmth in it. I've been maintaining that property since 2010, I said. I have documentation for all of it. Jean Aldrich believes the equitable contribution claim is strong. The lease pendens will stay on the property until this is resolved. My mother looked at the accordion file. She reached out and touched the edge of it with 2 fingers, the same gesture she'd used to slide the gift card across the table at the reunion. She pulled her hand back. So you're saying, she said, slowly, that you're going to fight this. You said Garrett needed security, I said. You made a decision for the family, without telling me. And you've always been the capable one. Those were your words. I stood up. I'm capable enough to protect what I helped maintain for 15 years, I said. Jean Aldrich will be in touch with your attorney. I picked up the accordion file. I put it back in the folder on the counter. I walked to the door and held it open. She stood. She picked up her coat. She looked at me for a long moment in the doorway, the flat December light behind her. She left. I closed the door behind her. Quietly. The latch caught without a sound. That was December. By February, Garrett had agreed to a mediated settlement, a recorded easement in my name, and a formal co-ownership interest structured around the documented contribution history. He called me himself to tell me, which I hadn't expected. He said he hadn't known about the accordion file. I believed him. My mother did not call for 6 weeks after the Tuesday in my kitchen. When she did call, in late January, her voicemail was different, shorter, quieter, a different register entirely. She said she hoped I was well. She said she supposed things had worked out.
I did not call back that day.
I listened to the voicemail twice, standing at my kitchen window watching the light on the water, and then I put the phone down and made dinner. The accordion file is in my apartment now, on the shelf above my desk. The rubber band is gone. Jean Aldrich's office removed it when they processed the documents, and I never replaced it. The file sits there, slightly splayed, the edges of the oldest receipts soft with age. I think about my father adding to it for 30 years, alone in the woodshop, in his tight, precise printing, keeping the record because he believed a record was the truth of a thing made permanent.
He was right about that.
The $3 gift card is in the same coat pocket I put it in at the reunion. The pine cone on the front has a small crease down the middle from where I folded it. I've thought about taking it out and throwing it away, and I haven't. It is, in its way, a document. It tells you something about what was intended. It tells you what some people assume capable means. The lake house in October, the porch boards gray-green and damp, the woodpecker somewhere in the firs, the river road empty below. Betty's hand on my arm at my car door. The Tillamook County assessor's header on 4 pages of white bond paper, 8:47 a.m., a Tuesday in October. The accordion file laid flat on my kitchen table between 2 mugs with small white fish on them. There are people who assume that the one who keeps showing up will keep showing up regardless. That the capable one has already been compensated by not needing anything. What they don't account for is that the record exists. It has always existed. They just didn't know anyone had been keeping it. If any part of this story stayed with you, the woodshop, the receipts, the moment she touched the edge of that file and pulled her hand back, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below what you think Garrett should do next. We'll be back soon with another story from the coast. This is Shoreline Quiet. The water remembers.